Good morning, everybody, and we're glad you could join us for what we're calling the aftermath of the elections. What we wanted to do today is just kind of give you a little bit of an overview of what happened in the state level, what happened on the federal level, why some of the things went the way they went, why ABC chose to participate in certain races and not others, and then what this looks like going forward for ABC, for the construction industry, for the merit shop, and really just for New Yorkers in general. What we're going to do today is Josh has put together a great presentation. I'm going to start off and review what happened here in the state of New York, and then Josh will talk about what happened on the federal level. As we go through this process, everybody is muted. The only two people who can talk are Josh and myself. So what we're asking everybody is if you have a question during the presentation or after, there's a dialog box where you can type in the question that you have. What we'll do is we'll go through the presentation, and then at the end we'll answer any questions that people may have. So this is being recorded. We will make the recording available to everybody either later today or more than likely early next week. And if you look at it again and listen to it again and have questions, you're always welcome to email Josh and myself at any point in time. Give us a call, shoot us a text. And with that, I think we will go ahead and get started here. So the aftermath of the elections. If you look at in totality what we as a chapter did, we endorsed 55 candidates across the state of New York and at the federal level. We had 13 Senate candidates, 36 Assembly candidates, and 6 people running for congressional office. And you can see that list of endorsements on your screen. If we go to the next slide, and before I talk about Floyd, just a little bit of background. When we look at the New York State Senate, there are 63 seats. It continues to be the focal point in the battleground during this election season. It has been that way since probably going back to 2008. It will likely be the focus for the next several years going forward. Of those 63 senators heading into the election day, there were 31 Republicans. There was one independent by the name of Simcha Felder. He is an elected Democrat, but he caucuses with the Republican Party. That would leave 31 Democrats, predominantly from the New York City and surrounding area. Of those Democrats, however, 5 of them are a breakaway group called the Independent Democratic Conference. That conference, along with the Republicans, have been in the majority rule over the chamber for the last 4 years. Going forward, we'll talk about why we think that will probably continue. So I want everybody to have a sense of how chaotic it is in the state Senate, and I think why we see some of the things that are happening and the ramifications and how they played out in this election. So, but I want to talk specifically about Floyd Rayburn, and he may be on the call today, and if he is, we all owe Floyd an incredible debt of gratitude. He has been a member of this chapter for over almost 3 decades now. He is a mason contractor. He got very frustrated with what was happening in Albany, and instead of sitting on the sidelines and complaining about it, he decided to get involved, ran for the 54th district to replace Senator Mike Nozzolio, who was retiring. What I want to share with all of you is Floyd was a champion for our industry, for the merit shop, and unfortunately, Floyd was targeted by the Republican Party because he was not their chosen candidate. They had another person in mind that they wanted in that office, but Floyd fought, and he went through the primary, got within 210 votes of winning that primary. But when I talk about he was targeted by his party, they spent upwards of $300,000, possibly even $400,000 to ensure that their hand-picked person won that race. Floyd put a lot of his own money in. We helped him raise some money. He ran a great race. He did win on the Reform Party line, he was written in as a candidate. So this past Tuesday, Floyd ran. He did pick up a good chunk of the vote in that district. We're thankful for Floyd raising the issues that are important to the Merit Shop and to the general taxpayer and business owner in the state of New York. We hope that he will be a role model for others to encourage them to go forward and run for office. And I hope that we can, at some point in the future, whether it's Floyd or somebody else, point to a senator or an assembly member that is from the Merit Shop and that believes in free enterprise and the Merit Shop philosophy. So if you happen to see Floyd out there, please give him your support. Thank him for what he did. He raised a number of critical issues that we're going to pounce on in the next legislative session. So just a heartfelt thanks to Floyd and what he did this past race. So, but moving into the Senate, Floyd was one of 13 people that we chose to endorse. Because Floyd was targeted by his party and because of some of the decisions that were made over the course of the last 2 years, ABC did not go, I guess for lack of a better term, whole hog on the Senate as we've done in the past. We were very strategic about who we endorsed and why we endorsed them. All 13 of those candidates, we can point to a very specific thing that they did for the Merit Shop, for ABC, and for our members. And we worked hard for all of those. We not only did our endorsements, we provided them with some resources for their campaigns. We did a little bit of social media promoting them and their race and what they meant to us. And I'm proud to say that of the 6 that you see on your screen right now, all 6 of them won their reelection or were reelected. If you look at to the bottom left of the screen, this is Chris Jacobs out of Buffalo. Chris won as a new candidate, replacing the retiring, stepping down, who knows what happens to Senator Panepinto. If we go to the next slide, you'll see the other 6 candidates on this screen. The only one that did not get elected was Julie Killian, who was running down in the Westchester area against incumbent George Latimer. Ran a great race, put up a great fight, and I think in 2 years we will once again hopefully have her as a candidate and someone that we can support. But the other 5 all are incumbents and all won their reelections. So of the 13 people, 11 out of 13 were successful. I think that's a good thing for all of us. So now as we look at the Senate, what does it mean? I talked about what it looked like before. We'll talk about what it looks like now. The Senate Republicans held swing races. George Amador, who we supported, Sue Serino, who we supported, Bill Larkin is someone we support as well. So they won all 3 of those contested races. In Senate District 7 out on Long Island, Elaine Phillips, she won. That allows us to hold that seat that was that vacancy was opened by Senator Jack Martins, who decided to run for Congress and did not win. So Elaine Phillips won that. And then in Senate District 5, Carl Marcelino, an incumbent, is in a tight race. It's somewhere between 1,600 votes. So that one's going to be going to paper, but we feel based on what we looked at and what we've seen that he should be fine. So overall, they held where they needed to hold, and they won. There is one race, Senate District 8, Michael Venditto, who is out on Long Island. He currently trails by about 45 votes. There are 76 absentee ballots that need to get counted. So that one's really too close to call. And they did, as I shared earlier, the Republicans picked up Senate District 60, Chris Jacobs, replacing Senator Panepinto. So there's a graphic of what it looks like right now. We could be in a situation where it's Republicans 32, Democrats 31. Going to the next slide, so what does that power look like in the Senate? Again, even though it appears that the Senate Republicans will have an outright 32-seat majority, I don't know if they will make a decision to just be a party of 32. They will have Simcha Felder with them. I think the reality is that there will continue to be a power sharing agreement between the Senate Republicans and the IDC. The IDC is that independent group of Democrats. That independent IDC, though, has grown. They were 5 members. They are now 7 members, what looks like 7 members. The latest one being Jesse Hamilton, who was an incumbent senator who was reelected, has decided to join the IDC. That power sharing agreement, I think, ensures that the people that we rely on to be gatekeepers, to be a firewall, to be a buffer from what's very clearly a somewhat New York City-driven progressive agenda on the left, they're our firewall. But working with that IDC, it gives them some flexibility and some coverage on some of the critical issues, may allow some of their individual members to vote no on an issue when maybe they should be voting yes. But what it also does is it covers some realities, and those realities are that there are a number of members of the Senate Republican Conference that are getting up there in age, a little long in the tooth, should we say, and there are some concerns about how long they can remain in office. So we have that issue to deal with. We have to deal with the fact that many of these Republicans are in marginal districts, and you'll see that in a little bit. They can't be true Republicans as we'd like them to be. They have to be a little bit flexible on some of those issues. But I think if we can get them to be fiscally conservative and maybe move a little bit on the social issues, that'll work out a little bit better for us. And then the reality of what we're dealing with. This is New York. Indictments seem to be coming left and right every other day. So you have to be prepared for some of those things to come. And I think that power sharing agreement between the Republicans and the IDC helps us get through both, or all 3 of those things, the age of some of those senators, the districts that aren't set up necessarily quite the right way, and if an indictment may come down. So that's a little bit of what we're seeing on the Senate side, and we believe that that's pretty much going to hold true, and we'll see over the course of the next few weeks. I don't know. I wouldn't make a prediction right now about when we'll know if there's a GOP IDC alignment. I think they're going to wait and see what happens in that Bandito race, as well as potentially what happens in the Marcelino seat. So it may not be until well after Thanksgiving, maybe even into the first part of the year, what that relationship looks like. As we move to the state assembly, this one, if you pay any attention to New York State politics, is wildly driven by the New York City interests. When you have an assembly member who may only cover 6 blocks in New York City, that is their entire district. And when you compare that to somebody from upstate who may have a district that is a part of 3 or 4 different counties. So this is a group that is very much controlled by New York City interests. You can see by the graphic there, there's 102 Democrats, there's 41 Republicans. There are a couple of seats that are still up for grabs based on the election, and then there are a few assembly members who do vote, were elected as independent candidates, but they tend to caucus with the Democrats. So we'll flesh those numbers out over the next couple of weeks as these races come to a final outcome. But Carl Heastie is likely to remain as the Speaker of the Assembly. The good news is, from an ABC perspective, all of our endorsed candidates won their seats, whether it was an incumbent going back or a challenger. And the GOP did pick up one, Angelo Morinello out in Niagara County, who was endorsed by ABC. He took out John Soretto, who originally was elected as a Republican but switched parties midstream and became a Democrat. So he obviously became a target of the Republican Party, and he lost his seat on Tuesday. So that's really where things are at from the state perspective. The national landscape has certainly shifted quite a bit. The election on Tuesday, I think highlighted some of the things that we've started to hear about and we've started to talk about both in this chapter, and I speak to my counterparts across the country. And at this point, what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Josh, who will walk through what ABC did from a national perspective and how the presidential election we think is going to impact the construction industry. So Josh, if you want to take it over.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, and good morning to everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So ABC National has been engaged in a number of races across the country, very targeted efforts. We utilized funds from our Free Enterprise Alliance as well as our PAC to integrate a full plan here of about $2 million for advocacy campaigns. In these cases, every one of them, with the exception of New Hampshire, was a win. But even in New Hampshire, it was a very close race. You're talking just a couple thousand votes for a U.S. Senate race. But these races were ones that we targeted in part because we felt like they would have the most impact for the benefit of our members. Whether it was supporting Marco Rubio in Florida or else helping Ohio as swing state to win, it certainly did help out the merit shop quite a bit. And what I want to do now is give everybody sort of a overview of the country, and then we'll get into some of the races that were key here in New York. But generally speaking, the United States Senate, the Democrats did pick up one seat. In Indiana, it was a tough race. Actually, it's probably be kind of interesting to see what happens in New Hampshire. But nevertheless, I think the power dynamic in the Senate hasn't changed much, if at all. The Republicans still hold that majority. And when you combine that with the U.S. House of Representatives, you have, for the first time in many years, a completely Republican Congress in a Republican White House. So if you look here, that's certainly a lot of red on this map. I think it's interesting. This election was certainly not one that was very conventional. But let's talk about here in New York a little bit. So the power balance in New York hasn't changed. We still have 18 Democrats in the House as well as 9 Republicans. But this map's very telling about the dynamics of the political culture here in New York. You see a lot of red north of Interstate 84. Upstate New York was certainly very influential in helping the Republicans maintain the state Senate to really put that out there. I think in this particular case, you have a lot of members of Congress that rode on the coattails of now President-elect Trump to get reelected. In upstate New York, Donald Trump actually outperformed Hillary Clinton. I think he's winning upstate New York last count by 100,000 votes. Obviously, the blue areas here you see still on the state map, Buffalo, Monroe County, Rochester, Albany, Schenectady area with Paul Tonko, and in downstate New York you've got pretty much New York City right through Nassau County. So really there hasn't been much power change here in our New York delegation. But here you have some of the elected representatives that we chose to endorse this year. All but one of them have been elected to office. Chris Collins, Tom Reed, Lee Zeldin were all incumbents. Were handedly, or I should say comfortably, reelected to their offices. Claudia Tenney ran in a 3-way race to replace Congressman Richard Hanna. Claudia was a state assemblywoman. She worked very well with the ABC on our issues. She's the only legislator I know that actually carried and pushed for a bill to eliminate a prevailing wage on certain types of municipal work. So there's no question in my mind that she will be a nice addition to our team working for us on the Hill. A little closer to home, John Faso. John is from the Hudson Valley. That race we'll get into a little bit, but nevertheless, having John as a congressman will definitely be a good thing for the ABC. He replaces outgoing Chris Gibson, who originally was friendly with the ABC but flipped on the PLA issue. I could tell you we've certainly spoken with Faso for a number of years. He worked with the ABC when he was a lobbyist in the State House here. He certainly gets our issues, and I think they're part of his core values. So we certainly have a good advocate in that. So right now I just want to give everybody an overview of some of the races.
Josh, if we could maybe just go back to that next slide and just point out to everybody, Chris Collins was the first sitting congressional person to endorse Donald Trump and his candidacy. There are several people that fully expect that Mr. Collins will probably be a part of the Trump cabinet, and in particular looking at him for a position in the cabinet to use his background as a business owner, someone who has bought businesses and revived them and got them to the point where they are growing jobs. So we may see him somewhere Secretary of Commerce or a similar type position. So that's something we definitely want to keep an eye on. And Chris Collins is a huge fan of ABC, and in particular our chapter and the members out in Western New York. So that would be a contact that would be huge for us.
Yeah, very good point you raised there, Brian. Chris Collins, I know, and just anecdotally, I'll share when we first met him, the way he was talking about issues such as government mandates, PLAs, prevailing wage as it's determined, one would have almost thought that he was an ABC member. So he certainly gets it and would be a great addition to any sort of team that Trump may put together. So let's shift gears here a little bit and look down on Long Island. This race was very interesting. New York 3, it's in part Suffolk County, but predominantly Nassau County. In this area, you had a sitting state senator, Jack Martins, running against a former county executive, Tom Suozzi. Suozzi was very popular as a county executive, and Martins certainly has a name in the area. His father was well known. Jack himself was. But at the end of the day, on election day, the voters, predominantly in Nassau County, revolted against the Republican Party, pretty much because there's been a lot of indictments related to corruption charges. Preet Bharara has certainly drained the swamp that Nassau County has become. The county executive there right now, Ed Mangano, has been indicted on possible bribery and corruption charges, along with several other elected officials, including the town of Oyster Bay supervisor. And if you look here on the map, Oyster Bay is a significant portion of this district. So really this vote in New York 3 was a mandate on government corruption. And quite frankly, too, Tom Suozzi was just a very popular, formerly elected official. So going into it, it's no surprise that Tom Suozzi has won this race. Moving up to the Hudson Valley, we talked to already New York 19. You can see here John Faso with now retiring Congressman Chris Gibson. John is, it was one of the more hotly contested races in the country. Certainly did get some headline coverage in the Wall Street Journal and other national publications. This district is perhaps a litmus test for the nation as a whole in some ways. You had a progressive Wall Street occupier kind of person, Zephyr Teachout. She had moved from Manhattan into the district to run for this seat. And this district, too, is very politically, I guess, divided in some ways. You have, in the lower portion, you've got the New York City commuters, and then in the northern portion, you have more agricultural-based farming communities, blue-collar workers. The economic, I should say, income disparity is significant as well. In the northern half is traditionally lower income, but the upper half is lower income, but the lower half, you have some people, for instance, that may be living in Sullivan County or southern Dutchess County that are earning nearly double the household income as someone maybe from Otsego County. So it's very socioeconomically different, and it, again, was sort of a litmus test. But at the end of the day, John Faso's message of lower taxes, fixing the economy, and working to incentivize job creation is really what prevailed in this district. And go ahead.
Yeah, Josh, the other, just for if people don't recognize the name John Faso, he is a big friend of ABC, former retained counsel in lobbying for the chapter. So getting him elected into Congress, again, much like we see with a Chris Collins, will hopefully reap, no pun intended there, Josh, big benefits for the chapter.
Absolutely. Yep. I think moving forward, John has already communicated that he looks forward to working with the ABC members to help us advance our goal of just promoting free enterprise and free market principles in Congress. Shifting gears again, looking out to New York 25, Monroe County. This is a race that we wanted to highlight because really Louise Slaughter is a longtime incumbent. She's been in Congress for probably, I don't know, 2 decades at this point, Brian. She's been in for quite a while. And she won 55 to 44. And I wanted to bring this district up because she really had to rely a lot on the Clinton coattails. Hillary Clinton did perform very well in Monroe County. They spent a lot of resources in that area. And what's interesting to note, too, as far as any of the races the ABC got involved with, that is congressional races, this is geographically the most dense of any of the races over any of the districts. And as far as performance for a Republican in a more dense area, Assini did quite well. And I would be surprised if Louise Slaughter remains in Congress for more than another term. And quite frankly, if Mark decides to run again, I think he would be a fine addition to the U.S. delegation to Congress.
Yeah, just so everyone knows, and Hillary Clinton carried Monroe County, one of only I think 4 upstate counties that she actually carried. And short of that, Mark Assini would be our congressman right now, but Louise jumped on the coattails of Hillary and just rode that. And in fact, some other Democrats did as well, with a couple of big town supervisors, the county clerk, all carried through on the coattails of Hillary. So it's unfortunate. Mark is an outstanding candidate, big proponent of ABC and our values, and hopefully this doesn't dissuade him. 2018, I think it's going to be another good opportunity.
Yeah, it definitely would be. And, who knows what will happen in 2 years. But, before we look that far ahead, I just wanted to declare for everyone that you can all relax. The ads are now off the TV and the battle is over. You definitely had a very aggressive campaign from both sides here. You had a lot of name-calling, mudslinging of the type that I don't think we've ever seen before. And I think that this analogy of boxing was pretty apt when it came down to it. You had a lot of punches thrown by both candidates on both sides. But at the end of the day, on Election Day, Donald Trump probably surprised most of the world. He's now the next president-elect, and we're going to see some very interesting things coming out. We'll get to that in just a second. But first I want to talk about this election. It was by far the most unconventional election that I've ever seen, and I think arguably a lot of pundits would agree. A lot of the polling in the mainstream media got this election wrong. It kind of reminiscent back to when Truman defeated Dewey, but all the papers had called that wrong back then as well. And again, Trump's path to the White House in many of the key Senate races happened very much how we here at ABC have predicted it would. And if you did attend one of our seminars earlier this year with Chris Singerland from National, came in and gave a really good overview of that. And I'm sure we'll probably have him again in 2 years, come back and talk about a lot of the races that will be happening midterm as well. But let's talk about the impact that the presidential race had on New York. And we kind of covered this already, but I wanted to again highlight, to Brian's point, you had Rochester went for Hillary. So did most of Erie County, and by most I mean outside of Chris Collins' district, it was a blue. She did take the whole county. But in these particular areas, you have large urban centers, Syracuse, Ithaca down here, Schenectady and Albany in the capital region. And up here in the top right corner, some people may think it's kind of an anomaly up here in the Plattsburgh area, but what I will note is that actual market is covered by the Burlington television market. So what you have is a lot of the presidential campaigns will spend a lot of money to penetrate into New Hampshire. So it's kind of a side effect of that. When Hillary spent a lot of money, it kind of had that after effect there. You also have SUNY Plattsburgh as well. But what's also kind of interesting is right across the river, this is where Burlington, the city of Burlington, is in Vermont. I don't think that Trump necessarily won that county because of himself. I think it's because he had a lot of Bernie voters. coming out to support him, and it pulled away from Hillary's base. And you can see again here, when it came down to the final results, Hillary did win the state 60-40 roughly. But again, upstate, Trump prevailed, winning nearly 100,000 more votes than Hillary did. And despite all the rhetoric and talk about Gary Johnson, he didn't perform any better than Ross Perot or any other third-party candidates did in years past. So Trump's path to the White House. The one map I wanted to show you was this one. This is the election results as of today. Really the only one left to count is Michigan here. But if you look here, obviously Hillary did really well in the Northeast and along the left coast of the states, and as well as here in the interior with Colorado and New Mexico. But what's interesting is Trump even, he did have to win Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida. His path was very narrow. He had to pretty much come right down here down the coast to win. We weren't sure what would happen to Georgia, but on election night it went resoundingly for Trump. And this is kind of an interesting one here too. When I was talking to Chris Singerling after one of his last presentations, Arizona was going to be a state to watch. And surprisingly enough, Donald Trump won Arizona. A lot of the political pundits thought that Hillary would win it, mostly because it has a higher Latino population. A lot of immigrants and second and third generation Mexican Americans now live there. But regardless of that assumption, voters did come out and give him the state. So next I want to just touch base on what we suspect a Trump presidency may look like. I think, if you look at his platform, his agenda that he released, we can definitely expect a lot less regulations to be coming out of this administration. In fact, he's made a commitment where he says for every one new regulation to come out, he wants to see 2 be eliminated. I think it's very possible we will see a repeal of project labor agreements. The Obama executive order, I believe the first one he put in office was to mandate PLAs to be reconsidered for any federal project or federally assisted project valued at $25 million or higher. Based off of what we've seen Trump do, we suspect that he is not a fan of PLAs. On his signature project in DC, which just opened, he took the old post office building and turned it into a hotel. He had actually, on a conference call, when asked about using union-only PLAs, he said there was no way he would ever do that on any project. So I think that's good news for us here in the Merit Shop. Another thing of point, one of his pivotal pieces of his platform was the repeal and replacement of Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act. He made a commitment to have that done in the first, I believe, 100 days of his presidency. And another significant change that will come as a welcome change for many businesses across the country is significant reform to our tax code. He wants to bring the number of tax brackets down to 3. He also wants to decrease the corporate tax rate down to 15%. As well as incentivize repatriation of funds by dropping that rate down to 10% to incentivize funds to be brought back into the country. This is sort of his way of offsetting a lot of the taxes that he wants to repeal. The idea there being with less regulation incentivizes more investment and development in the country. The last thing that's interesting is, as part of his platform of reform, he has also said that he will effectively work to ban any kind of direct lobbying, to close the revolving door between members of Congress and staff and the executive that quit the government one day and go working for a lobbying firm the next day. He effectively wants to institute a 5-year ban on any kind of direct lobbying immediately out of government service. So I thought all these things were very interesting. One other thing that was to take away was from his election night acceptance speech. Basically, he, in addition to calling for the country to come and become unified, Trump did ask, or I should say, did state his one policy goal of infrastructure investment, which was very interesting, very welcome here for the Merit Shop. He talked about specifically rebuilding our roads, bridges, airports, hospitals, public infrastructure. Just acknowledging that we have a lot of structurally deficient roads and bridges. We need to fix this, and that's going to be a very huge thing for the construction sector, because we are going to be building that. And I think we have a lot of positive things to look forward to here with the Trump presidency. The interesting thing to watch, though, was to see how well he works with the House and the U.S. Senate. Trump is the first president elected in history that is not already have held a prior public office or been a member of the military. So again, this is the first time we have a true business person that's taking command of the White House. So I think a lot of people just don't know what to expect. But coming from the corporate world, if we just rely on Trump's business proposals that he's giving to the country, that sort of contract with America, I think we have a lot of changes that we can look forward to. So in between Brian and myself, I think we gave you guys all a very good deep dive into what we saw on election night and what I think we can sort of predict will happen here in the first 100 days of the new Trump presidency, as well as what to expect in the Capitol here in Albany moving forward. With that, I would just like to remind everyone again, if you have any questions, there's the option in the questions dialog box on your interface. You can ask a question. And we do have one so far. We have a question of what does it mean for Chris Collins's congressional seat if he goes into the Trump presidency? That's a very good question. That district, like many that were carved up in 2010, were very Republican leaning. I think there's no real heir apparent right now, but you can be assured that whoever the Erie County Republican Committee puts in, they've done a fairly good job winning elections out there. I can't think off the top of my head what Democrat would run for that seat. Some of the big names that I would think of, like Mayor Brown or Panepinto or Kennedy, just don't live in that district. But I think we'll just have to take a wait and see policy for that seat.
Yeah. Hey, Josh, let's go. I want to go back 2 slides, if you could, to the map. So, some things to point out for people as you're typing in your questions. Josh talked about Florida, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, but Wisconsin is really the. I'm sorry, Wisconsin's right here. Wisconsin's the interesting state, and I think it's very emblematic of what we saw. So when you look at the exit polls and you look at the voter profile from Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, Missouri was another state that was considered, questionable, Georgia. There's going to be a lot of rhetoric about, it was the white vote, it was the return of the white male into the voting populace. I think that's some very unfortunate rhetoric and some very polarizing data points. I think when you look at it, and if the media does what they're supposed to do, it's a big question mark, but if they do what they're supposed to do, when you look at whites, blacks, Latinos who are non-college educated working in a traditionally blue-collar job, those are the 5 people in the 5 groups that went Trump predominantly. And I think it speaks to really where the country is, and it's a fear that what made us great, our manufacturing sector, our agricultural sector, have just been decimated over the course of the last 2 decades. And those people have a great fear of, I don't have that college education. Is there going to be an opportunity for me? These are people that are farmers. They're in our industry. They are looking at turning their business over to the next generation. They don't know what that means. Is it going to create an opportunity for the kids? So that's the group that really broke towards Trump. And what I'm hopeful is, between Trump, the Senate, and the House, now that we do have one-party control, that they will make the adjustments to get those folks settled. And if they can, I think it speaks to the future of whether or not that party can continue to hold onto the office. Because what we do know is this is a presidential year. Only once in the history since the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution was put in place has one party ever been given 3 consecutive terms. So it shouldn't have gone Democrat. I think everybody thought it would. The Republicans have it. But 2018 is going to be a blowback year. If the Republicans don't really embrace this opportunity, not to use Obama's term, but to change the face of that party, they are going to fail miserably in 2018. And what we don't need to get into as a country is this back and forth. This party's in control, that party's in control, this party's in control. I think we really need to create an agenda that addresses that white, Black, Latino, non-college educated, concerned voter. And on top of that, I think when you look at this, women did not come out and vote for Hillary. She got about 54, 55% of the female vote. The other went to Trump. So I think that probably speaks more to the fact that Hillary was just not a good candidate for the Democrats. But again, so there are these undertones that we need to be aware of, and Trump in the House and the Senate need to be aware of, because if they don't, they really only have 2 years to get this fixed. They don't have 4, because there are going to be a lot of Senate races up in 2 years. There are going to be a lot of House races. Every House race will be up again in 2 years. And much like we saw the 2010 Tea Party wave, we could see a 2018 very progressive left wave, which would just it would throw the country into chaos. So just wanted to make sure we pointed that out to everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And I just want to also just kind of piggyback a little bit on that. What can we expect from the Trump administration and trying to bringing in everyone into the same mold, or healing kind of that polarization that everyone felt on election night? I think what you're going to see is there's just a lot of people that were supporting Hillary that felt that their candidate lost. After 20 plus months of just intense campaigning, it's natural for someone to just feel very let down. Our politics has become very much a full contact sport. It's going to be interesting to see how Trump works things out to kind of calm that anger. And I think a lot of people could be pleasantly surprised with how he's going to operate. I feel, coming from the business sector, where we put a lot of emphasis on just getting the job done, a lot of the social unrest will kind of take care of itself, and I think people will be pleasantly surprised with what potentially could be coming from this. There's another question here asking about Supreme Court appointees. I think what you're going to find is, Trump has already put out there his, I think, top 10 possible appointees. Any one of them would be better for the merit shop than I think that the Clinton administration would have proposed. The real question to come out of it will be, what will the U.S. Senate do? There's no guarantee that Mitch McConnell is going to get along with Donald Trump. And Trump needs the U.S. Senate to confirm his appointees. And also remember, the Senate Republicans only have a 1-seat majority. So you're going to probably get some compromising to come out of the candidates. What I think will be more interesting to see, that'll relate more here at home, is will Trump reappoint Preet Bharara as a federal prosecutor here in New York? Obviously, with all the corruption fallout in Buffalo, Erie County, SUNY Nanotech, the former head of SUNY Nano, you have a lot of indictments that are still out there, a lot of cases that need to be tried. It would be smart of Trump to reappoint Bharara to see those cases get through the whole system.
Yeah, and I'll go back to the Supreme Court. I really think so that there is the vacancy. That vacancy will get filled with what's arguably a conservative. But I think what the reality is, you will see a Ruth Bader Ginsburg or a Stephen Bayer, who are the next likely to step off of the Supreme Court. I don't think you'll see either one of them make any attempt to do that until after the 2018 elections, in understanding that what happens in that election. Does the Senate go to the Democrats? Does the House pick up, the House Dems, do they pick up more seats? At which point it would make it a little bit more comfortable for them to step down, because you wouldn't have, for lack of a better term, that ultra-conservative person getting appointed to the court. So I think it's really going to be a 5-4 thing, at least through the end of 2018.
Okay, let's see. We have another question. Oh, I love this question, as this is something that I think will have have to work on a lot. How do we get people like John Katko or Elise Stefanik to realize that PLA mandates are a bad thing that diminish competition? Well, I think with the resounding victory of Chris Collins, John Faso, and others that definitely get our issues, and as well as Claudia Tenney, you now have a couple more members of the New York delegation who get our issues. So suddenly someone like a Katko or Stefanik who voted for PLAs are now in the minority in terms of their conference. And also the fact that they both comfortably won the re-elections, I don't think they have the ability to justify trying to stay close to the trades. So I'm an eternal optimist. I think 2017 would be a good opportunity for us to educate them. And I'd like to work with our members to get into these district offices starting in early January to start the education process, because when a vote does come up, we want to make sure that we've got them on our side.
But the other part of it too, and that is excellent point, Josh, is that I think our young freshman House members last year voted as a block to protect each other. So now you've got some more seasoned people who, while they may be new to Congress, they're square on our issues. So I think they're going to push them to vote a little bit differently. And I think you vote differently when you know you have all three all three of them are in one party control. So I think that helps. But the other part of it is, if you go back to what we talked about as this thing started, we did not endorse a whole lot of members in both the House and in the Senate. And we did that for a very specific reason. We need people to understand what our issues are, and we, as a chapter and as members, need to stand on our principles. And that will mean that at times we are not endorsing candidates that are not supporting us on our issues. And that creates a little bit of tension, I know, for some people who have very personal relationships with their senators and their House members. But the reality is, how can we continue to support a candidate who votes against us on our issues? We can't do that. We're basically endorsing their bad behavior. So we as a chapter, working with our PAC committee and our board, have made a decision to be a little bit more stern and to be a little bit more pragmatic on how we're doing these things. And if you're not a candidate that doesn't support what we're trying to do, you're not going to get our help, and you're certainly not going to get our endorsement. And Josh and I can tell you all too well the number of phone calls that each of us got from the Senate, and from candidates in particular, why didn't I get your endorsement? And we walked them through why they didn't. They weren't happy about it, but at least they understood. But more importantly, they cared enough to call. And so, yeah, you always wonder, if you don't endorse, does it limit your access? At the end of the day, access doesn't mean anything if people are voting the wrong way. So we're principled, we're going to stand on our issues, and we're going to support the people that support us.
Exactly. And for those that we think that are still there's some redemption to be had, especially with their members of Congress. Some of them did get the support of the building trades. So I think it's going to be important for us to get in there early and educate them early, such as John Katko or Elise Stefanik. On a state level, there's a question about Julian Killian. Would she run again? I don't have that answer yet. Maybe Brian, you can talk about that.
Yeah, listen, I think again, Josh and I are junkies and wonks on this stuff, so as sad as that may sound to all of you, that we actually live and breathe this stuff, because it sounds sad to me when I say it out loud. What we do know is that it's awfully difficult for a candidate who's running for the first time to win. So typically what happens is there is a 4-year cycle, whether that's Julie Killian or a Floyd Rayburn or, pick your other candidate that ran for the first time and lost. Typically it's a 4-year cycle. So you run once, build your name recognition with the hope that, hey, if you're successful, great. But if not, you built your name, you built your platform. In 2 more years you run, and it's a different race. Now you're your name is there, people know who you are, you're going against an incumbent that has a voting record that you can target. So my sense would be that Julie would be a candidate that is going to run again in 2 years, and I hope she does, because she is lights out fantastic and would be a huge help to our industry and just the business community in general.
Absolutely. And once she makes that commitment, if she decides to run again, if it's early enough, we would certainly do what we could to help support her, to give her a leg up when she starts entering the race. Let's see, we have a couple more questions here. This is going to be a fun one to answer. Do you think Trump will prosecute Hillary or have the IRS investigate the Clinton Foundation? It's going to be interesting to see what really happens. You know, this is a guy who is championed against corruption. It'll be really interesting to see if he follows through with his commitment. He did promise that he would investigate Hillary. And it's interesting you brought up, Pete, the question about the Clinton Foundation, because the IRS has the capability of determining whether or not an organization should have a not-for-profit status. So in other words, if you have a charitable group that is violating the laws and the IRS goes back and does an audit and determines you don't do enough to justify that not-for-profit status or tax exemption status, immediately 50% of its value or income becomes taxable, or has to go to be paid for taxes. So he can conceivably, with the right IRS appointment, effectively bankrupt or root out the Clinton Foundation. So it'll be interesting to see how he approaches that.
Here's what I'll say to that. Two things. On Hillary, I hope he doesn't. I think that would be a really terrible thing for our country. I think that is an extremely polarizing action. However, I do think the IRS investigating the foundation is a definite reality.
Yeah. So I think you would get pretty much the same desired effect. In other words, the ending of the alleged corruption. We have another question here. What do you think the labor unions will do to get their members back into the Democratic fold? That's a good question. And Brian, I don't know what you have for thoughts on that.
Yeah, listen, they rolled the dice on Hillary and they lost. But what we do know is they've been very aggressive over the last 4 to 6 years. They've been investing heavily in Republicans. I think there are a number of members of the House and the Senate that they can turn to get some of their things done. And that's, but I go back to my previous comments about 2018. If this White House and this Congress can't get together and address that blue-collar issue, which, by the way, that is union households by and large. There's a number of union households that fall into that black, white, Hispanic, non-college educated, blue-collar world. If the White House and Congress can't figure out how to get to those people, then in 2018 you will see the building trades and the AFL and SEIU and the hotel workers and the communication workers. They will get their people into the office, and they will be an obstacle. So they will find a way. They've greased the skids, but this really falls to Trump and Congress to get that blue collar community comfortable. And if they can do that, I think we'll be okay. Yeah,
time will really tell what happens in the next 100 days of Trump's first 100 days in office. It'll be, like I said earlier, it'll be very interesting. And again, just to kind of recap, there's been a lot of interesting things that came out. This was certainly a very unconventional election this year. But what we can be assured of is the power dynamic in the Albany State House will likely remain the same or pretty close to it. So moving forward, we know who the players are and who we need to work with. Congress, for our purposes of our delegation, while we have a couple new faces, that bodes some optimism for maybe bringing about some change in the voting habits of some of the other now two second-term incumbents that we've had some issues with. And I think we really have to take a wait-and-see approach to see what happens the first 100 days of the Trump administration. I don't see any other questions. So I guess it's been about an hour. Maybe we want to wrap this up. And I want to again say on behalf of our government affairs team and all the effort that we did across the state and across the nation, thank you everyone for being an ABC member and being committed to the cause. It's really through your membership that we're able to have the effect and defend the Merit Shop and get engaged with these campaigns and be able to provide you some of the services that we do and enjoy doing on a daily basis.
And I will close with echoing what Josh just said and finish with this. What this election showed us is never say never. Never say we can't get something done. I think Donald Trump just proved otherwise. So when Josh or myself come to you and say, hey, we need you at a meeting, or we need you to come to this event, or we need you to write this letter, please do. We can't sit back and wait for people to control our destiny. We need to grab it. We need to drive what we want and what our agenda will be. So we need everybody engaged and involved. I hope that you had a great construction season. If you're still working, keep going. I hope everybody has a fantastic Thanksgiving and a wonderful Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and whatever it is that you celebrate. 2017 is going to be a great year for the Empire Chapter, and we look forward to helping everybody continue to grow their business.